Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Long ago, in a time when kings were warriors, and kingdoms were forged through blood and fire, there existed a crown. This crown was said to hold unimaginable power, gifted by the gods to the first ruler who united the warring tribes of the land. The great king who wore it built an empire that spanned continents. Yet, as his rule grew, so did his thirst for power. In the end, he was betrayed by those closest to him, and the crown, once a symbol of unity, became a cursed object, driving men to madness. It was buried deep within the earth, where the whispers of its power were meant to die with it, but legends, as they often do, survived. The tale of the cursed crown passed through generations, growing more terrifying with each retelling. Some claimed it granted absolute strength and eternal life, but those who sought it out were said to be consumed by its curse, losing their minds and souls to the dark magic that clung to it and the kingdom of Lather. These stories were but distant memories, until a young prince, full of ambition and envy, decided that the crown would be his. Prince Alaric stood at the edge of the great hall, his fingers gripping the cold stone of the castle wall as he stared at the gathering below. His sister, Queen Alira, sat on the throne their father once occupied, her golden crown gleaming in the firelight. Around her were the nobles, counselors, and advisors who hung on her every word, their loyalty evident in the way they bowed and scraped before her. Alaric clenched his jaw, feeling the familiar bitterness rise within him. He had been born a prince, destined for greatness, yet it was Alira who had inherited the throne. It was Alira who commanded the respect of the kingdom. And it was Alira who their father had chosen to rule. He should have been the one on that throne, not her. Alaric's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of one of the counselors, speaking in a low, measured tone. The borders to the north remain secure, my queen, but there have been rumors of unrest among the lords. They grow restless under your policies. Alira nodded thoughtfully, her brow furrowing. I will travel to the northern provinces myself to address these concerns. The people need to know that I stand with them. There it was again, that sense of duty, that unwavering commitment to the kingdom that everyone admired in her. But Alaric saw it for what it truly was, weakness. She spent too much time trying to please everyone, bending to the will of the nobles and the common folk alike. She lacked the strength to truly lead, and strength, Alaric knew, was the key to power. As the counselors continued their discussions, Alaric slipped away from the hall, his mind consumed by thoughts of the cursed crown. For weeks now, he had been plagued by dreams, visions of the crown, its dark aura calling to him, promising him the power he so desperately craved. The legend of the crown had always fascinated him, even as a child, but now, as a man, it had become an obsession. He had spent months searching for clues, tracking down ancient texts and speaking with those who still believed in the old stories. And finally, he had found it, a map, hidden in the archives of the royal library, detailing the location of the crown's resting place. It was buried deep within the forgotten tombs, a place few dared to go, but Alaric was not afraid. He had waited long enough. The crown would be his. The journey to the forgotten tombs was treacherous, but Alaric was undeterred. He rode through the dense forests and across the barren plains, his mind fixed on his goal. His only companions were a handful of trusted soldiers, men loyal to him and him alone. They did not question his orders, nor did they speak of the legend of the crown. They knew better than to question a prince's ambition. The entrance to the tombs was hidden beneath a crumbling stone structure, long forgotten by time. Alaric dismounted his horse, his heart pounding in his chest as he approached the dark opening. His men followed him, their faces grim but determined. "Stay close," Alaric commanded, his voice echoing in the silence. We don't know what we'll find down there." They descended into the tomb, their torches casting flickering shadows on the damp stone walls. The air grew colder the deeper they went, and Alaric could feel the weight of the centuries pressing down on him. But he did not falter. The crown was close, he could feel it. At last, they reached the burial chamber. It was a vast, circular room, the walls lined with ancient carvings depicting scenes of battle and conquest. And there, in the center of the room, sat the crown. It rested atop a stone pedestal, its dark metal gleaming in the torchlight. Alaric stepped forward, his eyes locked on the crown. He could feel its power radiating from it, a dark, seductive energy that called to him. Without hesitation, he reached out and took the crown in his hands. The moment his fingers touched it, a jolt of energy surged through his body, and he staggered back, gasping. The crown was heavier than he had expected, its weight pressing down on him both physically and mentally. But Alaric welcomed the sensation. This was what he had been searching for. This was the power he had craved. Slowly, he lifted the crown and placed it on his head. At first, there was nothing. No sudden surge of power, no overwhelming sense of strength. But then, gradually, Alaric began to feel it. A warmth spread through his body, filling him with a sense of invincibility. He could feel his muscles strengthening, his mind sharpening. He was no longer just a prince, he was a king, but along with the power came something else. A whisper, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. It was a voice, ancient and malevolent, speaking directly into his mind. "You are mine now," the voice hissed. "You will never be free." Alaric tried to shake off the voice, but it clung to him, invading his thoughts, his very soul. He could feel his mind slipping, the darkness creeping in. But he refused to give in. He was stronger than this. He had to be. Days passed, and Alaric returned to the kingdom, crown in hand, but he was not the same man who had left. The power of the crown had changed him. At first, it was subtle, his temper flaring more easily, his decisions becoming more ruthless. But as time went on, the changes became more pronounced. He began to isolate himself from his sister and the council, locking himself away in the castle's tower, where he would spend hours alone with the crown. The whispers in his mind grew louder, more insistent, until they became a constant presence. They urged him to take control, to seize the throne from his sister, to crush anyone who stood in his way. And slowly, Alaric began to listen. He started making decisions that baffled and alarmed his advisors. He dismissed loyal soldiers, replacing them with mercenaries who cared only for gold. He raised taxes on the common folk, plunging the kingdom into poverty. And he began amassing a private army, preparing for the day when he would challenge Alira's rule. But the more power Alaric gained, the more unstable he became. His mood swung wildly from anger to despair, and his once sharp mind grew clouded with paranoia. He began to see enemies everywhere, even among those closest to him. It was only a matter of time before Alira learned the truth. When word of Alaric's actions reached the queen, she was devastated. She had always known her brother was ambitious, but she had never imagined he would go this far. The Alaric she knew was gone, replaced by a man driven mad by the curse of the crown. Alira knew she had to act, but the thought of going against her brother was almost too much to bear. They had grown up together, shared the same dreams and hopes for the kingdom. But now, he was a threat, not just to her rule, but to the entire realm. She sought counsel from her closest advisors, but none of them could offer a solution. The only answer seemed to be to confront Alaric and take the crown from him by force. But Alira hesitated. Could she really raise a hand against her own flesh and blood? It was the old mage, Myron, who finally gave her the answer she needed. "The crown is cursed, my queen," Myron said, his voice grave. "It feeds on ambition and greed, turning even the noblest of men into monsters. Your brother is not beyond saving, but the crown must be destroyed if he is to be freed." Elira nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision before her. She knew what she had to do, but the path ahead was fraught with danger. Alaric would not give up the crown willingly, and the curse would not be broken easily, but she could not abandon him. She had to try. Elira gathered a small group of her most trusted companions, Myron the mage, a skilled swordsman named Darian, and a healer named Lyra who had knowledge of ancient rituals. Together, they set out on a dangerous journey to the Forbidden Lands, where the curse of the crown was said to have originated. The road was long and perilous, filled with dangers both seen and unseen. They were pursued by dark forces, drawn to the power of the crown, and had to fend off mercenaries who sought to steal it for themselves. But Elira and her companions pressed on, driven by their loyalty to the queen and her brother. As they journeyed, Elira was plagued by memories of her childhood with Alaric. She remembered the boy who had once been her closest friend and confidant, the one who had always dreamed of greatness but had never been consumed by it. Now, he was a stranger, lost to the curse, but she would not give up on him. She couldn't. The final confrontation came in the heart of the Forbidden Lands, where the crown's curse had been born. Elira and her companions faced the ancient spirit that had cursed the crown, a malevolent force that fed on the ambition of those who sought its power. The spirit taunted Elira, telling her that she too was tempted by the crown's power, that she was no different from her brother. But Elira stood firm, her love for Alaric giving her the strength to resist the spirit's manipulations. In a fierce battle, Elira and her companions fought not only the spirit but also Alaric, who had fully succumbed to the curse and saw his sister as an enemy. The battle was brutal, and Elira was forced to make a terrible choice. In the end, she realized that the only way to save Alaric was to offer herself in his place. She pleaded with the spirit, offering her own soul in exchange for her brother's freedom. The spirit accepted, and with that, the curse was broken. Alaric was freed from the crown's influence, his mind clear for the first time in months. But Elira was left weakened, her body and soul scarred by the curse. In the aftermath, Alaric was filled with guilt and regret for what he had done. He renounced his claim to the throne, pledging to support Elira's rule and to make amends for the damage he had caused. Together, they began to rebuild the kingdom, their bond stronger than ever. The crown was buried once more, sealed away where it could never be found again. And the legend of the cursed crown lived on, a warning to future generations about the dangers of ambition and the true cost of power. Elira stood at the edge of the kingdom's vast northern plain, her cloak billowing in the cold wind that whipped across the snow-covered hills. Behind her, Darian, Myron, and Lyra prepared their camp for the night. The long journey had taken its toll on them, both physically and mentally. Her body still ached from the battle with the spirit in the Forbidden Lands, and the weight of what she had done, what she had sacrificed to free her brother, hung heavily on her mind. She had expected Alaric to meet them here, at the border between their kingdom and the wild, untamed lands beyond. It had been weeks since the crown's curse was broken, since she had watched her brother shed the madness that had consumed him. She hoped that he would be ready to come home, to start the long road toward rebuilding not only the kingdom but the bond they once shared. But Alaric hadn't come. He had sent word that he needed time to reckon with the guilt that gnawed at him, time to understand who he was now without the crown's influence. Elira didn't blame him for needing space, but it didn't make her heart any less heavy as she stood in the fading light, staring out at the horizon. The others left her alone as she watched the sun dip behind the distant mountains, casting the land in a soft, golden glow. She had hoped that, By now, the ache in her chest would ease, that the emptiness she felt since the day the curse was broken would fade. But the price she had paid to save Alaric still lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. It wasn't just the physical scars, though they were there, hidden beneath her armor and robes. It was something deeper, a hollow space within her that she couldn't seem to fill. Elira, Myron's voice broke through her thoughts, soft and cautious. You should rest. She turned to face him, offering a weary smile. The old mage had been a constant source of strength through their journey, his wisdom and knowledge guiding them when the path seemed darkest. But even Myron couldn't fully understand what she had given up. I will, soon, she said quietly. I just need a moment. Myron nodded, his gaze full of unspoken concern, but he didn't press her further. He turned and walked back to the camp, leaving Elira once again alone with her thoughts. She wasn't sure how much longer she stood there, staring out into the distance, but eventually, she felt the cold settling into her bones and knew it was time to head back. As she turned to make her way to the camp, movement in the distance caught her eye. A figure on horseback, moving slowly through the snow, heading in their direction. Her heart leapt in her chest. Alaric, she would recognize his silhouette anywhere, the way he sat tall and proud in the saddle, his cloak fluttering behind him like a banner. But as he drew closer, Elira's initial rush of relief was tempered by a sense of unease. He wasn't alone. Another rider followed a few paces behind him, their identity hidden beneath a heavy hooded cloak. Whoever they were someone Alaric trusted enough to travel with, and given everything they had been through, that wasn't a small thing. Elira stood at the edge of the camp, watching as her brother dismounted, his eyes searching for hers the moment his feet touched the ground. When their gazes met, Alaric hesitated, something unreadable flickering across his face. Elira, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Alaric. She took a step toward him, feeling the familiar tug of longing to embrace him, to hold him close and tell him everything would be all right. But something stopped her, something in the way he held himself, the tension in his shoulders, the weight in his eyes. Who's with you? She asked softly, her gaze flicking to the hooded figure who remained a few steps behind. Alaric glanced over his shoulder, then nodded to the rider. A friend. Someone who helped me, after everything. The rider stepped forward, pulling back their hood to reveal a woman with striking features, sharp, intelligent eyes framed by dark hair that was streaked with silver at the temples. She looked to be only a few years older than Elira, though there was a weariness in her gaze that suggested she had lived far more than her years. My name is Seraphine, the woman said, her voice calm and measured. I've been assisting Alaric on his journey to understand what happened. To understand the crown. Elira's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied the woman, her instincts immediately on edge. There was something about Seraphine that felt off. She couldn't quite place it, but the air around her seemed charged with an energy that Elira couldn't ignore. How do you know about the crown? Elira asked, her voice laced with caution. Seraphine's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. I've spent many years studying artifacts like it. The crown is one of many relics from a time when magic and power were far less contained than they are now. I've dedicated my life to understanding them, and when I heard of your brother's encounter with it, I knew I had to help. Elira looked to Alaric, searching his face for answers, but he only nodded in confirmation. She's been helping me, he said softly. Helping me figure out how to live with what I've done. There was a vulnerability in his voice that tugged at Elira's heart, but it didn't fully ease her concerns. She had spent too much time facing the dangers of the cursed crown to trust easily now, especially when it came to those who claimed to understand its power. Why are you here? Elira asked, her gaze still fixed on Seraphine. "Why bring her now, Alaric?" Alaric sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I need to make things right. And Seraphine knows how." Elira frowned. "Make things right? What do you mean?" Alaric stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if even speaking the words aloud carried a weight he could barely bear. "The crown isn't just cursed, Elira. It's connected to something bigger, something darker. I thought I was free of it, but the truth is, the curse runs deeper than either of us realized." The ground seemed to shift beneath Elira's feet as the implications of his words sank in. She had thought the curse was broken, that their battle in the Forbidden Lands had ended the crown's hold on her brother. But now, she could see it in his eyes, the doubt, the fear that the darkness hadn't fully left him. "And what does she want in return for this help?" Elira asked, her tone hardening as she nodded toward Seraphine. Seraphine's smile didn't waver. "I want nothing more than to see the crown's power contained. Its curse has touched many lives, not just Alaric's. This is about more than just your brother, it's about ensuring that no one else suffers as he has." Elira wasn't convinced, but she could see the exhaustion in Alaric's eyes, the weight of everything he had endured pulling him down. He had been through enough, and the last thing she wanted was to push him away again. "Fine," she said quietly. "But understand this, if you try to take advantage of him, if you have any other motives for being here, I won't hesitate to stop you." Seraphine inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "I understand." With that, Alaric gave her a faint, grateful smile before stepping closer to Elira. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled her into a tight embrace, his arms wrapping around her with a desperation that told her everything she needed to know. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry for everything." Elira closed her eyes, resting her head against his shoulder as the tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. She didn't need to say anything, there were no words that could undo the past, no apologies that could erase the pain they had both endured. But in that moment, with her brother's arms around her, she knew that they would find a way forward. Together, the road ahead would not be easy. There were still too many unanswered questions, too many lingering threats that could rise from the darkness they thought they had escaped. But they had each other, and for now, that was enough. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Elira finally allowed herself to hope.